Send your best practices. Tips to remember when you're sending those emails. 1, only use email when it's the best communication option. And with that, I say avoid email wars. Sometimes I call that email volleyball. Have you seen that? Where it goes back and forth and back and forth. And you're like, you know what? I bet if they would just pick up the phone and talk to each other, they could just squash this in 5 minutes. But instead, it's 3 weeks of emails going back and forth. Email is not the only way to communicate. Do you remember phone? Or face-to-face? I mean, these are other communication options, which a lot of times are much better. So depending upon the sensitivity of the communication, how important it is, etc., how complicated it is, we might not want to do email. Sometimes what I do is I'll have a phone conversation or face-to-face, and then I might follow up with email. Because sometimes you do want that documentation, but maybe it's better to just follow up with that email. Don't use email to hide from an issue or a person. Have you ever seen that in the workplace? Oh yeah, quick hand. Where, I don't want to tell her face-to-face, so I'm just going to send her that email Friday at 6 o'clock. Okay? So I always say, never put in an email what you wouldn't say to somebody directly. So you want to be careful about that. Also, use bullets and summarize whenever possible. Do you ever get those emails and it's just like all these paragraphs and it goes on and on and on, and you just like get this sinking feeling in your stomach, like, oh God, this is too much, I'll just go to the next one. Okay? So you want to use bullets, have white space, summarize. With that, you want to also have a very descriptive subject line. And if action is required, write action in the subject. Let people know right at the outset so they don't even have to open up the email. Do you know people who are too lazy to open up the email? Or maybe too lazy to keep reading to find out what they need to do? So go ahead, put it right at the beginning, say action, let them know whatever the action is, then you can go into more detail later. But that's certainly a tip to ensure that people follow up on things they need to. Next one is be cognizant of email tone. How many of you have had miscommunications over email? Where either you misinterpreted or they misinterpreted? That is very, very common. In fact, I had it not long ago with my husband because we text message a lot. And so we'll send these long text messages. And so I was real excited about something one day. So I sent him this text message. And then he just texted me back like 10 minutes later, K. And I was like, what's wrong with it? He can't even write okay. And I was like, was he having an attitude or something? I called him up. I was like, what's wrong with you? He was like, Dana, I'm driving on 285. I just can't write right now. And so again, that's me misinterpreting. I'm interpreting something that wasn't really there or wasn't intended. So you have to be very careful with that. All caps, exclamations. How does that come across in email? Angry. It sounds like you're yelling. So you really, really want to be careful about that. Be very cognizant of the tone that's coming across in email. Certainly you want to automatically spell check. Hopefully everyone is doing that. And it's better if you can set it up to be done automatically so you don't have to click spell check. But set your preferences so anytime you hit send, it automatically spell checks. The last one I love. We were just talking about it over here. Never send an email when you're angry. How many of you have been burnt by that? Where you shut it off? Okay, she's the only one being honest. Okay, you shut it off, and then as soon as you hit send, you're trying to recall it. You're trying to get it back. And I don't know about you, but that recall thing never works for me. No. And then it's even worse because now it's got this big flag on it that says I tried to recall it. So now everybody's definitely going to read it. Okay. So what do you think I say if I say don't send an email when you're angry? Because of course you're not going to stop getting angry. What should you do instead?
Write it out, let it sit,
exactly.
Come back to it.
Go ahead and type it out, get it out, because sometimes we just need to get it out. Don't put anybody in the two, okay? So type it out, leave the two blank, and then save it as draft. And typically what my rule is sleep on it, and then come back to it, if at all possible, the next day. And I would say with that rule, about 70% of the time I end up not sending it. Usually what happens is within that 24-hour period, it's been resolved, or I go back and I read it, and I'm like, ooh, I don't really want to send it like that, and I reword it. My other suggestion is type it, but send it to a friend and let them read it. And let them give you feedback on the tone and how it comes across. And that's what I'll do. I have a couple friends I really trust, and I'll send it to them, and I'll say, do I sound like I'm mad in the email? Because I'm mad. But I don't want to sound mad. So do one of those two things. But definitely get away from sending emails when you're angry. Yes?
Even when you're changing environments, like when I came from a military environment and then I started working in, you could say, corporate America, there's a certain different kind of language. And one of the responses that I got back, and I thought I had toned everything down and tried to be tactful, but they said I was very directive and it sounded like I was ordering, telling them what to do.
And she brings up a wonderful issue, which is culture. Do you think culture makes a difference?
Yeah.
Oh, a huge difference. I mean, she mentioned the military. That's one distinct culture. I've worked with religious organizations. They have another distinct culture. Other corporations, nonprofits, small companies, large companies, financial institutions. So whether you're in the north or the south, cultures vary a lot. So you've got to know your audience and you've got to know your culture, definitely.